Great. Okay. My name is Alice Ryan. I'm Head of Insight and Public Engagement at the Arts Council. And today I will be bringing you through today's presentation. Just to say, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. The research and the insight team are all on the call, and they will try to answer any questions and clarifications as we go along. So I think we'll kick off if that's okay. We'll start with a brief agenda. So firstly, I'll take a minute to talk about exactly what Arts Insight is and how we carry out the research. Then we'll dive into arts attendance, followed by arts participation. A reminder that when we talk about participation, we're referring to the public taking part in the arts, such as singing in a choir, playing an instrument, dance classes, that kind of thing. Then we will cover two relatively concise sections in reading for pleasure and getting information about the arts, followed lastly by a final section about how the public in Ireland views the arts and how that has changed throughout the time that we've been carrying out this research. And finally, I hope to bring all these findings together to leave you with a really clear picture of the public's behaviour and attitudes towards the arts in 2024. So to start with, what is Arts Insight? Many of you will be familiar with this research from previous years, but just to recap, every year at the Arts Council, we commission a survey to understand the public's attitudes and behaviour relating to arts and culture. The survey is conducted by the research agency Ipsos B&A, and it has been taking place since 2018. The survey is a nationally representative sample of over 1,000 people, and crucially, it takes place in person, which is increasingly rare, but really adds to the quality of the research. It takes place at the same time every year, so in autumn. So this research was carried out in September and October 2024. You can see here on the map how the nationally representative sample breaks down. So for instance, 29% of Irish adults over 16 live in Dublin. So 29% of our sample were based in Dublin. So that gives you an example of how nationally representative research works. One thing I just want to point to in terms of how useful this data is, that the long-running nature of the research means that we have a wealth of comparative data to draw upon, and that provides us with a deep understanding, not only of trends in 2024, but how behaviours and attitudes to the arts have changed over the last 7 years. So kicking off with arts attendance, I've put a few questions here that I'm hoping by the end of this morning, you will feel confident that you have a really strong understanding of. We'll start with that top line question there. What was the pattern of arts attendance in 2024? So has attendance gone up, down? And for those who did attend, how many events are people attending and across what art forms? Then next question is who is attending? Who doesn't? And then we will take a few minutes to delve more deeply into both the heavy attenders, enthusiasts, and those who don't attend at all. Then we'll seek to understand the motivations for attending, and crucially, the barriers to attendance. So what is stopping people attending more? Finally, we ask those who have attended in 2024 to rate their overall experience of the event. So the quality of performance, the value for money, and what's interesting is that we're able to track how these metrics have changed in the last 7 years. So starting with that top line question, what percentage of Irish adults attended an arts event in 2024? And we're really delighted to be able to share the good news that arts attendance is up across the board. So we presented respondents with a list of 22 different arts and cultural events. And on the left, we can see here that 83% of Irish adults had attended at least one of these events in the 12 months previous. So where we say any arts event, that includes commercial cinema, country music, stand-up comedy, rock or pop music. You'll remember that this was the summer of Taylor Swift, Coldplay. And then on the right, we can see that almost 60% of adults had attended the type of arts event typically supported by the Arts Council. So that excludes the country music, comedy, rock and pop music. And these are really, really strong numbers. So for any arts event, it's an increase of 11% on last year. And for the type of arts event typically supported by the Arts Council, it's an increase of 8%. So really significant positive shift across the board. And to help give a perspective, some context to these figures, it's helpful to compare them across the last 7 years. So on this chart, we can see here that the percentage of people who attended any arts event in navy, and those events typically supported by the Arts Council in green. You'll notice, of course, that 2022-21 is not included for obvious reasons. But this chart, it really helps to tell the story of why the results this year are just so positive. We can see that in 22 and 23, there was this slow return to the arts. It's really, really only in 2024 that a significant increase happens, and we see this bounce back to pre-COVID levels. So we can see here that in 2018, 60% of people had attended at least one arts event typically supported by the Arts Council. And that in 2024, we're now closing in on that figure at 59%. So that's an 8% increase. Another factor that we are really always keeping an eye on isn't just how many people have attended, but also how many times people attended. Again, there's positive momentum on this front, with the average number of events attended in 2024 nearing pre-COVID levels. So you can see here on the green line that in 2018, the percentage the number of times that people attended an Arts Council type event was around 8. And that really dropped post-COVID. So you see it dropping there to about 6.5. Which is, you can imagine, like that has a really big impact on overall attendance. Because it wasn't just that less people were going, it was that those who were going less. So it's really fantastic to see that the average number of arts events attended has been gradually increasing. And in 2024 is at 7.8. And you can see that's really, really close to that 2019 figure of 7.9. So now we kind of move on to the patterns that we see in different types of arts events. As I mentioned, we presented respondents with a list of 22 different arts and cultural events. And we asked which, if any, people had attended in the previous 12 months. This allows us to see if there are any particular increases or decreases by art form. And the great news here, again, is that there are largely increases across the board and very few minimal declines. So you can see here that the top arts events attended by the Irish public in 2024 were film, rock and pop music, or plays and street arts. Some of the arts events I've highlighted include plays because this has seen a really, really positive trajectory. So in 2024, 20% of Irish adults had attended at least one play, an increase of 6% on 2023. I've also noted here that if you look specifically at the age group 50 plus to 64, there's actually 27% of that age group had attended a play, and 26% of women had attended a play. There was also positive momentum for art exhibitions, which increased by 4%. And just to say there, that means that 16% of the population had attended an art exhibition. And looking there at some of the lower percentages, we see here, for instance, that, skipping ahead. We see here, for instance, that 6% of the population had attended classical music. But it's really interesting, again, when we look by age group, that when we look at over 65-year-olds, that jumps to 12% of that age group. Similarly, although 5% of the adult population had attended circus, that's actually 12% amongst people with kids. So you see here that when we get to the bottom of the chart, some of those percentages are quite low for some of the art forms. But just to note two things. Firstly, for the most part, we're seeing a slight increase or a leveling out. So there's not a very negative change. There's only small decreases where there are decreases. And secondly, it's worth remembering that a relatively small percentage translates to a significant number of attendance, particularly when we factor in frequency of attendance of these art forms. So that's something we'll go into more detail shortly. But firstly, we wanted to help give an idea of how some of these percentages translate into audience numbers. So you see 1-2% and you're thinking, God, what does that mean? So we asked our research agency to level these percentages up to population figures, something that is only possible because the sample is nationally representative. So what do these numbers look like? And you can see here that when we say that 20% of the adult population attended a play, we're talking about over 800,000 people. Similarly, for art forms such as, say, opera, where 3% of the population attended, it's still nearly 130,000 people, and many more attendances than that when we think about how many times an opera enthusiast might go in a year. So hopefully that's helpful in understanding the breadth of potential audiences by art form. One final slide I wanted to share on attendance patterns before I move on to who is attending are some insights on festival attendance. And again, here there's more positive news. So we can see here that over 50% of Irish adults attended a festival in 2024, and that's up 14% on last year. Interestingly, when we look at the different categories of festivals, the highest attendance is at local cultural arts festivals, with 29% of adults saying they attended a local cultural or arts festival in 2024. In terms of demographics, when we layer on demographics there, it's no surprise that for a large-scale music festival, attendance peaks among 16 to 24-year-olds. So interesting there. But one that really I found very interesting was that if we look at dedicated arts festivals, 13% of the overall population had attended a dedicated arts festival. But really interestingly, when we look at Connacht Ulster, this rises to 22% of the population. So that kind of covers the attendance patterns. We see that like the big story is that big increase. But our next question is, who is attending? And in particular, which groups are leading the increase in attendance that we're seeing? So the first finding we identified on slide 1 was that there was an 8% increase in attendance at the type of arts events typically supported by the Arts Council. So what we want to know now is which demographic groups are driving this increase. So is it more men than women? Is it older or younger audiences? And on gender, we can see there that both men and women have seen an increase in attendance. It's relatively evenly split. On age, you might remember that we had a particular concern around younger audiences post-COVID. We saw that younger audiences, particularly 16 to 24-year-olds, were not coming back to the extent that older audiences were. And you can see here that, interestingly, in 2024, we do see a modest increase among 16 to 24-year-olds. And very interestingly, quite a jump among 25 to 34-year-olds. So see there's actually a 13% increase in amongst 25 to 34-year-olds. Equally, a strong increase among 35 to 49-year-olds, and another modest increase amongst those over 50. On the right then, we can see audiences split by socioeconomic groups, where for those of you who haven't been aware of this previously, ABC1 is the higher socioeconomic bracket and C2DE is the lower socioeconomic bracket. And we can see there that there is a bigger increase in attendance amongst people in the higher socioeconomic bracket than the lower socioeconomic bracket. And that's something we'll look into in more detail later on in the presentation. And I think by the end of the presentation, you'll see that I go on a lot about frequency of attendance, but it really does impact the total picture. So demographics really don't tell the whole story because that's really only the percentage of people who are attending and they could only be attending once. So it's really important to factor in frequency of attendance to get the full picture of who is attending. And one way in which we do this is by segmenting the population based on the number of different types of arts events that they attend. So if you see here, just looking at the bottom of our screen, there is, of course, a percentage of the population who we know don't attend any arts events at all. And then there is that group who attend only film. And then there's what we call occasionals. And these people there are people who attend one or two different types of arts events. So then maybe they go to a traditional music event and to the theatre. Then we have regulars who attend 3 to 4 different types of arts events. So maybe an art exhibition, a contemporary dance performance, maybe a classical music concert. And finally, at the top there, we have our enthusiasts who go to over 5 different types of arts events a year. And just to stress there, for clarification, we're not talking about how many events in one art form a person might attend. So if someone goes to 10 different music events, they're not who we're trying to capture here. We're really looking at people about how they attend based on how many different art forms they attend in a year. So just to reiterate, the enthusiasts there, they're going to a ballet, they're going to pop music, they're going to several different types of art forms. And the first question we want to know is, if we look at our population, and a reminder, we've our 1,000 people, and they level up nationally representative to our total population. And what we want to know is, how does the population break down across these different groups? And you can see here, if we start at the bottom again, 17% of the population don't attend any arts at all. Now, that's a quick calculation that we could have done ourselves from the first slide, because we know that 83% of the population did attend something. Then we see here this group, there's about 12% of the population who go to film only. Then we see that 27% of the population went to one or two different types of arts events last year. There are occasionals. That 23% of the population went to 3 or 4 different types of arts events, and there are regulars. And then 20% of the population went to 5 or more different types of arts events. But what's really interesting is to see how these groups have changed since last year. And we can see here that the percentage of people who attended at least one thing increased between 23 and 24. So it makes sense that our non-attenders decreased, and that the biggest increase was amongst enthusiasts. So enthusiasts are really driving that increase in attendance. 20% of the people we interviewed said they went to 5 or more different types of art forms. And that is an increase of 6% on last year. So again, that gives us a really good perspective on, when we look at the population as a whole, what percentage are going regularly, what percentage aren't going at all, and then what percentage are the frequent attenders. But here I go again, frequency. So we then asked people how many times they went. And you might remember from the original slide that the average number of arts events that Irish adults attended in 2024 was 6.4. So most people, if they went to an arts event, they went about 6 times a year. So once every 2 months. And when we add in our frequency based on these different segments, look, it stands to reason that our enthusiasts, those who attend over 5 different types of arts events, have the highest average number of arts events. So you can see here that our enthusiasts attend nearly 13 events in a year. So just over once a month, double your average attender. And regulars, they're very close to that average figure, just over 6. And occasionals are closer to 3 arts events. You can see here, 3. And I know I bang on a lot about frequency, but one of the reasons it's really important is that it's helped us understand the makeup of arts audiences and how to target them. So for instance, if the bulk of people who attend were occasionals, coming out of curiosity, say, and attending like 3 times a year, then that would impact how arts organisations would need to market and recruit. The focus would be casting our net, much wider. Because if people were only coming 3 times a year, then you'd need more people to attend. So when we do take frequency into account, we can see what the share of overall attendance is. And I don't think there'll be any surprises to anyone who works in the sector to see that actually enthusiasts make up over half the share of arts audiences. And they're a really, really important group to the sector, and one we will go into more detail on. But firstly, just a quick look at occasionals and regulars. So these two groups, so if you are someone who in your work, you're trying to target regulars and occasionals, the first thing you need to know about these groups is that they really conform to the national demographic profile. That means they're relatively evenly split by gender and by socioeconomic brackets. The one thing I will say, there's a slight difference in that occasionals are more likely to live in urban areas. So maybe in that case, the sheer availability of arts provision in urban areas means that although they're not massive enthusiasts, they drop in, as we say, we know they go to about 3 things a year. And then regulars, they're likely to be a bit younger. But the two groups who have very, very distinct demographic profiles are the enthusiasts and the non-attenders. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about these two groups. Looking firstly at enthusiasts, we can see that they're more likely to be under 50, they're slightly more female, and a lot more likely to live in urban areas. One thing about this group that we really want to flag this year is that they are increasingly from higher socioeconomic groups. So in 2018, 58% of enthusiasts were in ABC1. So that's the higher socioeconomic bracket. And again, I think that's something we do know and recognize about enthusiasts. But in 2024, 72% of enthusiasts were ABC1. So that is a really, really big increase in that breakdown. Increasing socioeconomic inequity in the arts attendance is something we really need to take into consideration as a sector. And, given all our commitment to ensuring that the arts is accessible to all, something we really want to watch on that front. Then just to take a minute to look at those non-attenders, and obviously at the Arts Council, if we were a very commercial organization, we would all just be saying, just go for your enthusiasts, get them and get them keep coming, get them to increase that frequency. But obviously something we're really, really passionate about is the arts for all. So we asked our research agency this year to actually do a bit of a deeper dive into non-attenders. So we asked them to pull together the demographic profile, not just of non-attenders, but also those who went to film only. And crucially, what they were able to do was they were able to take these two groups and to ask them, well, look, would you like to? Would you be willing to attend an arts event? And there were 7% of people who just said, no, look, it's just not for me. So we were able to take that group out. So we're not, climbing up a wall that's not possible. And then we were able to kind of get in more detail about those people who are actually really interested in attending. And the good news is that most of the non-attenders said they would be willing to attend. Only 7% said, as I said, that they didn't want to attend. So who are these people? And it's interesting to note there's obviously a few characteristics which are kind of the opposite of the enthusiasts, which makes sense. They're kind of the mirror image. So they're over 50. They're slightly more likely to be male and from the lower socioeconomic bracket, although this group is more likely to live in Dublin. Interestingly, a higher proportion of non-nationals than nationals said that they'd be interested in attending. When we asked them what type of events they might be interested in attending, they were most likely to say music events. And one thing though, so as I say, we go through all the demographic things and we try to see, well, what stands out? And we see there the kind of top line things, lower socioeconomic bracket, slightly more likely to be male, over 50. But one thing that really, really struck us this year was that they're significantly less likely to have a family connection to the arts. So only 42% of non-attenders who are willing to attend have a family connection with the arts. And that's compared to 53% of the total population. So in his understanding how we can attract more people to the arts, it helps to understand this group and what their characteristics are, and also that interesting fact that they're less likely to have that family connection. But then moving on to the next section, we ask then, why do those who do attend, why do they attend? So those of you who are familiar with Arts Insight will know from previous years that year on year, spending time with friends and family while attending the arts is a key motivator, and it's no different this year. With both that factor and to have fun and enjoy oneself, the top two reasons, and increasing from last year too. And that's great to hear. But for many of us, the key question remains, why don't you come more? What are the barriers for people to attend even more? So we ask those who attending if they would like to attend more. And if they say yes, then we ask them, what are some of the reasons that you aren't able to attend as much as you would like? And there hasn't been, where there hasn't been that a huge change of what motivates people in recent years to attend, we have seen over the last 7 years and even year on year from last year, more significant changes in the barriers holding people back from attending more. So the number one reason there you can see for not being able to attend as much as people would like is that it's difficult to find the time. Interestingly, this barrier peaks for 35 to 49-year-olds. And that's the life stage that may have small children and not even have time to blow their nose. I'm just speaking for myself there. But the barrier that I've pulled out in red is one that has seen a really significant increase in the period of time we've been doing this research. 44% of people said that it costs too much. This is an increase of 5% on last year, but crucially, it's an increase of 14% since we started to do this research in 2018. And more importantly, it is a particularly significant factor for that age group that we're really keen to draw back to the arts, those who've been slower to come back, the under 34-year-olds. So again, this is something we really, really need to consider. One other interesting thing about barriers to attend is that there are regional differences as well. So 31% of Irish adults said that there was limited choice or poor quality of this type of event where they live. But this rises to 55% for people in Connacht, Ulster. Similarly, only 23% of adults said it was too far to travel. But actually, that rises to 38% for people in Connacht, Ulster. So this slide has a wealth of data on what's holding people back. And as you can see, we can cut this data by demographics and pull some really actionable findings. And finally, for this section, when we've managed to get people to attend, we then want to know what they thought of the experience. And again, here, things are pretty positive. We can see here that when we asked respondents to rate their overall experience of the arts event that they had attended, including the venue, the atmosphere, interaction with other attendees, in 2024, 48% rated 9 or 10, where 10 is extremely satisfied. And that's very close, as you see there, to what we found in 2018. And it's no surprise there that there was a peak in 2022 when we were all so happy to get out of our houses, and then you just have this stabilizing in recent years. The other thing I want to draw to your attention to is that not an all satisfied metric. So the one in red there, and it's really, really good to see that that continues to be very stable. Equally, you can see in the far right of our screen there, we ask respondents how happy they are with the quality of performance. And I've included both the extremely satisfied for 2018 and for 2024. And you can see there, it remains fairly stable, though not quite as positive as in 2018. So a pretty positive overall experience with the arts. However, lastly in the section on attendance, we asked respondents to rate their satisfaction with value for money. And this is a less positive trajectory. We can see here that only 39% of people were extremely satisfied with the overall value for money of attending an arts event in 2024. And that is a decrease of 11% since we started this research in 2018. Equally as important to note is that unfortunately, the percentage of people who are not at all satisfied is creeping up as well. Of course, the public's perception on this will be heavily impacted by wider economic concerns. So post-COVID inflation, housing crisis, utility cost spikes, all of this puts any expenditure under greater scrutiny. And equally, when we talk about the cost of a night at the arts, even if ticket prices aren't increasing substantially, there are other factors like the cost of a meal beforehand, the babysitter, the taxi, all of which can add to a costly outlay. Either way, we're seeing a significant negative shift in people's perception of the value for money of arts events. So something we just really want to watch. I'm conscious there that there was a lot in that first section. So I just wanted to take a minute to summarize some of the key findings. Obviously, the first thing to note is that incredibly welcome bounce back of attendance levels. Not just that there's an increase in the number of people coming, but actually that the average number of events people are attending is increasing as well. Really, really positive. But with that positive news comes some notes of caution. Cost is increasingly a barrier, particularly for younger audiences. And for those who attend, satisfaction with value for money has decreased significantly in the last 7 years. Another element to bear in mind is the changing socioeconomic makeup of frequent attenders of the arts, where we see enthusiasts much more likely to fall into higher socioeconomic groups. Okay, so a lot there, and a reminder that all these slides are going to be up on our website and you can delve into more detail on them. But just to press ahead, moving on to arts participation. And again, a reminder, we're trying to understand here what percentage of the Irish public take part in the arts and what motivates them to do so. As you can see here, I'm delighted to report another positive trajectory. When we asked respondents whether they had taken part in an arts activity, you can see the list there that we included, such as dance of any kind, drama, book club. The percentage of people who said they had participated increased by 10% on last year, with nearly 30% of Irish adults saying they had participated. And again, due to the long-running nature of this research, we can see how arts participation shifted over the last 7 years. When I look at this graph and I see this bump in 2020, I just see all these people running up to their attic and taking out their old violin and saying, "This is my moment." And then by 2021, this decreases again. And perhaps people are saying they just wish they could get out of the house and go to the National Concert Hall and see someone else play the violin. So as you see, we had this real big peak in activity in 2020 and then stabilizes again. But it's positive to see it returning to pre-COVID levels. And then what's really interesting is the next question we ask them is, okay, so if you did participate, why? What motivated you? Excuse me. And the number one reason for taking part in the arts, in an arts activity, is enjoyment or pleasure. And that is at the same level as last year. But the second major motivator, and the one that has seen the biggest increase on last year, is the percentage of people who say they take part because it improves their quality of life or their well-being. Really, really interesting to see such a jump in that. You can see there, when we compare it to last year, you can actually see it's a 17% increase. And of course, across society, we're seeing people becoming more aware of their well-being and the role that we have to take ourselves in doing things that improve our well-being. And it's just fantastic to see people seeing the arts as, really helping with their quality of their life. Other factors seeing an increase there are that it helps people get out of the house, develops their creativity and self-expression, and helps them feel part of the community. So moving on now to our next short section, and that is around reading for pleasure. We're going to look at what percentage of people read for pleasure and how it breaks down across genres, such as fiction, biography, non-fiction, and poetry. Then I'll take a look at who is more likely to read. We can see here that 65% of Irish adults over the age of 16 had read for pleasure in 2024. Sorry, jumping ahead of myself there. This is up 4% on 23. 45% of people had read a work of fiction, a novel, a story, or a play. That's up 4%. There's been little change in the percentage of people who read biographies, autobiographies. That's relatively stable at 24%. But there's increases across non-fiction and poetry too. So again, a really positive trajectory. You can see there all the percentage changes in green. So some really good findings. In terms then of who is most likely to read, perhaps there's no surprise here to those on the call who work in publishers. Women are more likely to have read for pleasure in 2024. 72% of women said that they read for pleasure in 2024 compared to 59% of men. And those in the higher socioeconomic bracket are more likely to have read than in those in the lower socioeconomic bracket. In terms of changes on last year, I thought it was really interesting to see quite a significant increase in the percentage of 25 to 34-year-olds who read for pleasure last year. I do try to avoid stereotypes along demographic lines, but I do seem to remember Sally Rooney having a novel out last year, so just putting that out there. Equally, we saw an increase amongst those over 50, but a slight decline among 16 to 24-year-olds. So again, something to watch. I'd just like to stress again that, we have this wealth of data, and if you are working in this sector, I would absolutely love, my email is going to be on the bottom of the last slide. We would love to engage with you on this and hopefully be able to provide even more detail. So for all the marketeers on the call, in the next section, we are going to look at how people get their information on the arts. And we asked respondents to tell us how they usually find out about the arts events and the activities that they're interested in. And look, it's going to be no surprise to all those hardworking marketeers on the call who live and breathe this stuff, that the number one way in which the Irish public find out about the arts is through social media. So in 2024, 43% of Irish adults said that social media was the main way they got their information about arts events. And we've seen that increasing year on year, but it's interesting to see another 7% increase on last year, followed by word of mouth, which remains stable on last year. Then television, which has seen a decrease of 5% from last year. Local radio, very interestingly, sees a decrease, but interestingly, national radio sees an uptick along with national radio advertising. And then in terms of, if we look at that, if we delve a little bit more deeply into that social media, we can see here that Irish people, they're most likely to get to use Facebook. It remains the main source, but it's really on the decline. And we can see here in the last 12 months, it's decreased by 6%. And really interestingly, you see here that it's Instagram that is really, really increasing. As again, I feel a bit like I'm preaching to the choir because I know you guys are working in this day in, day out, and that increase in Instagram, I'm sure, will be very, very clear to you guys from your work. YouTube remains relatively stable, but I've included TikTok here because we have seen an increase there. And also, you can see here that, okay, so it increased by 5% this year, and we see that 18% of the Irish public said that that's how they found out about arts events. But a whopping 51% of 16 to 24-year-olds found that out. Again, I don't think there's any surprise here, but just really interesting to see the vehemence of the data really, really supporting that. Again, given this multi-annual data that we have, we can really clearly see how the shift from traditional media sources to online has progressed. If you see here the pink line, that relates to any online source. So it includes social media and websites. And this visualization really helps to show how clearly the switch has happened. Where in 2019, you see here that radio was the top source for finding out about arts events, followed by TV in blue. And then you can see here newspapers. And it's just amazing to see that shift. And I don't think there's any surprises here about the increasingly important role of online. So in some ways, it's more interesting to track what is happening across the other three sources. We can see here TV in blue and radio in green. They're at fairly similar levels. They're really fighting it out to be the second key source for information, with radio actually, passing out TV in 2024. But it is newspapers that have seen the greatest decline as a source of information about the arts. You can see there in the orange line. But all this being said, it really just depends on who you're targeting. And we can see here that different age groups are more likely to find out about the arts in different ways. And the breakdown by age group here on the right is, look, it's exactly how you'd expect, but it is really important information for when we're building our marketing campaigns and when we are targeting. So you can see here that, online is the major source for those under 50, and the more traditional news sources see greater penetration amongst those over 50. Just to flag, before we finish up this section, there's one thing I wanted to note. As well as asking people how they get their information about the arts, we also ask them how satisfied they are with the availability of information of the arts. And I just thought this was really, really interesting, that as our sources of information for arts events has changed over time, and online has very much taken over, the public satisfaction with the information available has declined. So we can see here that in 2018, 27% of the population said that they were very satisfied with the availability of information about the arts. And that has declined to 15% in 2024. So I guess if you were a radio, a newspaper, TV, you would be saying online is all well and good, but maybe we get a deeper connection via these more traditional mediums. So moving on to our final section, and that is attitudes towards the arts. So in this section, we explore how the public views the arts, but also how, if at all, perception has changed. Every year, we provide the public with a list of 18 statements about the arts, and we ask them how much they agree or disagree with each statement. In 2024, the statement with which the highest percentage of people strongly agreed was that Ireland is a creative nation. There was also strong agreement that the arts in Ireland should receive public funding, that arts education in schools is as important as science education, that the arts play an important and a valuable role in Irish society. And very interestingly, one of these top statements was that the arts from different cultures gives us insight into the lives of people from different cultures. So there's this really clear consensus amongst the public of the integral role that the arts plays in Ireland, of its educational importance, and for providing cultural understanding. Also receiving strong support are statements which relate to the role that the arts play in attracting tourists, in defining what it means to be Irish. And the idea, which is obviously good news to all of us, that as much importance should be given to providing arts amenities as is given to providing sports amenities. So again, a lot of really positive sentiment there towards the arts and the role it plays in society. But in terms of the statements which saw less strong agreement, these seem to relate to a disconnect that we see between the arts and people's personal lives. So for instance, among the statements that saw less strong agreement were involvement in the arts makes me feel a stronger connection to where I live. Only 19% of people strongly agreed with that statement. Equally, only 18% of people say that the arts plays a significant part in their lives. It seems as if, in general, on a national level, people really recognise the power of the arts in broader society, but it isn't always trickling down into people's own lives. This connect is most striking in the statement that people were least likely to agree with. Only 12% of the Irish public strongly agreed that there are equal opportunities for everyone living in Ireland to attend and participate in the arts, regardless of class, age, ethnicity, and disability. So this is a really, really clear message, and one that we in the Arts Council, as you will all be aware, are really, really passionate about tackling. I will say, for the last slide, I pulled out the most strongly agree. But if we look at a more detailed breakdown of how much the public strongly agrees, neither agrees, disagrees, and disagrees and strongly disagrees, it's really clear there. And you can see from all the green on this slide that overall, there's a really positive, strong sentiment towards the arts in Ireland. So I think it's just important to include this slide because you see all that green. So, even where people aren't strongly agreeing, they're generally agreeing. But just to note, the pattern remains the same, that equal opportunities point is really, really clear. One other question I wanted to include in this section is that we ask, I think it's the last question we actually ask. We ask about the family connection to the arts. So we ask respondents if their parents took a strong connection or took a strong interest in the arts. And then we ask if people would like their children to take a strong interest in the arts. And I wanted to share the results of this survey because I think it's a really strong indicator of how the arts is seen as a positive force. So 41% of people in 2024 said that their parents took a strong interest in the arts. But 70% of people said that they would like their children to take a strong interest in the arts. So even if it's not something you grew up with, it's something that people see as positive. And I just think that's a really, really wonderful and inspiring finding. Given that we hold this comparative data going back 7 years, if we take we have a relatively positive picture for 2024, it's really interesting then to see, how it has changed over the last few years, if at all. So this slide pulls together all the positive statements and it takes the average agreement, neither agree nor disagree, and disagreement over the last 7 years. And you can see here that there was a dip in 2020 in the kind of positive sentiment towards the arts. And one would imagine that that was really driven by that extreme context of COVID, where maybe when they were asked, the public was asked questions about the level of funding the arts should receive, it might have been deemed less important relative to, say, health spending in that particular moment. But we can see there that, it fairly quickly jumped back into the 70s. And we can see overall that there hasn't been a major dip in public sentiment. So then just the last thing we wanted to look at was, okay, generally we're seeing pretty strong agreement across the board. But the last thing we wanted to look at was just checking each of those statements. And were there any statements that has changed significantly? Specific aspects of the arts. And there was one really striking finding. The one statement of the 18 statements that we have tracked that has seen the most significant shift since 2019 is that there are equal opportunities for everyone living in Ireland to attend and participate in the arts, regardless of class, age, ethnicity, and disability. So in 2019, 24% of the public strongly agreed with the statement. And as we know, in 2024, only 12%. So a decrease of 12. So it's not just that people don't agree that there is equality of access to the arts, but people are also less and likely to agree. And it's interesting to map this finding to the finding we learned earlier in the presentation, that frequent attenders to the arts are increasingly likely to be from higher socioeconomic groups. So there's certainly evidence that people's perception of increased inequality of access when it comes to class is borne out. Again, quite a chunky section there. So I just wanted to kind of take a kind of really a top line view of that. And it's very, very clear that the Irish people believe in the power of the arts, in the role that it can play in enhancing cultural understanding, its economic and cultural value, its educational importance. You know, we saw that the vast majority of people would like their children to be involved in the arts, but there is a disconnect, and the public are increasingly concerned about access and equality. So that kind of concludes all of Arts Insight for 2024. But I really hope you have a sense of how the public views and interacts with the arts, and also the shifts we've seen. I wanted to put a little bit of time in just to try and summarize that, so we leave you with a really clear message. Firstly, there was that great news, a strong bounce back in attendance, and the fact that we're seeing it not just in overall attendance levels, but also in the frequency with which people are attending. And I want to take a second, to be honest, just to congratulate you all on this hard-fought win. This doesn't just happen. There has to be brilliant arts events for people to attend, and it's a real credit to the sector and all your hard work. So a real sincere congratulations on that. You know, to see more people come back at overall levels, and to see people coming back, you know, people don't come back regularly unless there's brilliant things to attend. So a sincere congratulations and thanks. In terms of just some of the concerns that the public have, the issue of cost, it came up very clearly. We saw 44% of the population saying it was a barrier to them attending the arts more frequently. And that is obviously an increase of 14% since 2018, and particularly significant barrier for under 24-year-olds. Equally, we have seen how the public rate the value for money of arts events decrease over this period. So cost and value for money are definitely something to watch. Finally, the point we just covered, there is this really positive sentiment towards the arts. People believe in the arts. They want their children to be involved. When they participate, they see this positive impact it has on their well-being. They really believe that it helps their understanding of other cultures. But they are less and less likely to agree that there are equal opportunities for everyone living in Ireland to attend and participate in the arts. This is something we're acutely aware of, and you will be aware of the measures in the Arts Council that we're taking to tackle this, including the All-In Access Scheme, Open Up, Creative Places, and our recent events with Pathé Point. And it is, of course, something that we will be working really closely with the sector on. But for now, that wraps up our Arts Insight 2024. Sincere thanks to you all for attending, to our research partners, Ipsos BNA, and to the research and insight teams here at the Arts Council. I have included my email address here and that of my colleague Amelia, who works on Insight with me. We are totally obsessed with the data, and we love talking and looking into it in more detail. So please do reach out if there's anything you think we might be able to help with. The presentation will be up online today, so you can go through it and look in more detail.